One of the things we were chatting about here before we started this past week, literally taking a piece of what would typically be late July or even August and moving it backward or forward, depending how you look at it, back into May. But we have had literally a week of summer here over the last week. Our mean temperatures for the week, looking backwards here, 6 to 12 degrees Fahrenheit above normal on average, with higher departures in the northern part of the state. That's on the left side here. That's the warmest week, or at least the largest departure we've had in some time. I went back into April. I couldn't find anything that large, but with the temperatures we've had, we many parts of the state saw their first 80-degree temperatures, and a couple reached 90 for the first time, but an unusually and warmer than it turned out to be, warmer than forecast, but really truly a piece of summer. Precipitation, a little bit more nuanced in terms of where you were. Some areas picked up some fairly significant rainfall here over the last week, but it was more spotty and scattered. Some spots, as you can see across the northern part of the lower peninsula, picked up more than an inch. Other areas picked up very little, less than 1/10 of an inch, and again, it just depended on where you were. And in that regard, there are some interesting patterns, I think, that are worth noting, because while many parts of the state, especially from southwestern and western lower up through the northern part of the lower peninsula, have been inundated with heavy rain and several heavy rain events here, we do have a couple of other spots that I wanted to bring out. One is the Upper Peninsula, especially the central part of Upper Michigan here, where and as well southeastern portions of Lower Michigan that were missed by many of these heavier rainfall events. This is this case it's a 30-day, but you can also see the same thing on the 60-day precipitation departures. And in some of these spots, we're running less than 50% of normal. Now that's going to change here over the next 12 to 24 hours. I'll talk more about that in a second, but it is worth noting. And it isn't that we don't have moisture. There's certainly at depth, because of all the heavy rain we had last fall, and we had heavy precipitation through at least the first half of the winter. There's definitely moisture at depth there, but the topsoils have become relatively dry. Would also note that with this past week, with the warm temperatures and in most cases full sunshine, we had potential evapotranspiration rates at their highest so far this year. In many cases, over 0.2 of an inch per day. And again, that's midsummer, mid to late summer, actually, a type of rate that we would see. So again, in those areas, the topsoils have become certainly drier, certainly a contrast to what we see across portions of Lower Michigan. On the weather map this morning, some big changes coming, and that's really I think the major theme in the forecast here. Our map, we still are under the influence of a subtropical area of low pressure here off the east coast, with clockwise flow around that and southerly flow out of the Gulf of Mexico and out of the subtropics. And that's really been why we have seen such an unusually summer-like pattern here over the last several days. But the change is already on the way. It's actually through now western portions of Upper Michigan. That is a cold front here. You can see on the map. It is actually moving right now through central Upper Michigan, and will move across the state during the next 12 to 18 hours or so before it passes on to the east by tomorrow afternoon. There is another cold front behind that up here in Canada. Canada would be the operative word here, because the air mass we're dealing with is much, much cooler, 20 degrees cooler than where we have been. With this frontal system, you can look at the radar time lapse here for the last hour. You can see there's quite a bit of precipitation, mostly light to moderate rain with some embedded rumbles of thunder here. Doesn't look like anything severe, but just heavy rain would be certainly localized heavy rain would be the biggest threat with this as it moves through. But it is going to move from northwest to southeast across the state. You can also see down to our south another large area of moisture and convection here. All of those are going to combine, especially this afternoon, for much of the lower peninsula. And I think the greatest threat for much of the state will be here during the afternoon and into the early evening. A little bit later than that, overnight hours into early morning Friday for the far southeastern part of the lower peninsula. Here's the forecast map for tomorrow, 8 o'clock, and you can see that the forecast progs have the front almost out of the state by that point in time. Note that also there are some lingering showers behind the front, so after you experience the wind shift, it'll be out of the south and southwest and shift around to the northwest after the front goes through. You'll also winds should pick up. You'll also feel a drop in both air temperature and humidity, but there will be some lingering showers for a couple of hours behind that. And that, I think, for most of the first half of the day tomorrow in the southeast corner, we'll still see the threat of some of those showers. And then finally, by Saturday morning, you can see all of that is well off to our east. And then here's the big air mass that we talked about that will lead to the major change for the weekend with much, much cooler, fair, dry weather. So depending on where you are, even by tomorrow, the far northern, northwestern parts of the state will already be under the influence of this high, but then shifting to the south and east during the day. So by the afternoon tomorrow, fully most of the state should be under or feeling the change, influence of this change as it goes through. So fair and dry for the weekend after the precip here today into early tomorrow. Next chance for any rain, probably not until Tuesday or Wednesday of next week. So we're looking at a very unusually actually cool weekend. Temperatures dropping 20 degrees from where they have been. Highs only in the 50s, upper 50s north, and low to mid 60s, north, and lows in the 40s generally with some upper 30s. We could see in a couple of areas over the weekend on Saturday or Sunday morning in the low-lying areas, we could see a little bit of patchy frost, but right now not looking at anything like what we saw here earlier in May. Just that it will be significantly cooler and drier, and again, just a few clouds. It should be beautiful. Soil temperatures, by the way, thinking about Scott's presentation here, we will see some drop off from where they have been, but it won't be cold long enough probably to get below. We may see a few hours below 60 degrees in many sites, but it's not going to be very long because beyond the weekend, we will start to see moderation in temperatures once again. We're beginning on Monday and continuing the next week. And that's sort of where we're headed here. Precipitation, before I get to that, the medium range, precipitation totals generally 1/2 to 1 inch for the upcoming week. And much of that will be over the next 12 to 24 hours, especially across northern parts of the state. And for a change of pace, you can see here in the map, the heaviest rain is expected across northern lower and into eastern upper Michigan. And so some of those areas that have been dry, I think we'll see at least some temporary real relief. Less precip generally expected as you go south across the state, but most of the state should see at least 1/2 inch here over the next day or so. And then I mentioned the medium range guidance. We have the development of really another upper air ridge, which is where we've been here for the last week, and it's going to come back again. But in this case, look for an increase in temperatures again by Monday or Tuesday, continuing for much of the work week next week. Both the 6 to 10 and 8 to 14 day outlooks are very similar, and you can see in the upper right here, warmer than normal mean temperatures forecast from almost all of central and eastern continental U.S., including Michigan. Precip's a little more difficult because we're on the dividing line here with this upper air pattern. Storm track will be farther north. I think that's a good bet. And so Michigan is on sort of a division between wetter than normal conditions to our west and north and drier than normal conditions to our south. So that could change by day, but if I had to put a label on it, I think probably I would edge towards the drier than normal with that upper air pattern, but we will see. There still will be weather systems there. It's just how far south they get in the state. So it's the best bet, though, looking for warmer than normal weather returning here by next week and beyond that, possibly. Also finally a new ensemble of long lead outlooks here from NOAA's Climate Prediction Center, and they're consistent. They're very similar to what they were in the past couple of months. For the month of June, you can see here that they suggest at least warmer than normal mean temperatures. Also the same case for the June, July, and August, and even beyond that if we went on to the early fall. But warmer than normal mean temperatures are still in the forecast. They were in the last couple of months. They are this as well. For technically or officially for the month of June, you can see the EC or equal chances for Michigan, but not too far off to our west and south, above normal or wetter than normal conditions. And that has been the theme in most all of our long lead outlooks here recently. For the June through August 3-month period, you can see that Michigan is in that above normal precipitation favored as the most likely scenario. So warmer and wetter is still the general direction. Just a couple last things about this. Right now, the El Nino is in a neutral state, or the El Nino Southern Oscillation out in the equatorial Pacific. There's really no tropical forcing of anything or of note in the Pacific going on that would lead us to believe move one direction or the other in terms of the forecast. So these outlooks are based primarily on numerical forecast guidance and long-term trends. As a result of that, there's a little bit less confidence than there typically is, but countering that or balancing that is the fact that these outlooks have been consistent for the last few months, and they still, again, collectively point towards that warmer and wetter than normal direction for a lot of our growing season. So summarizing here, again, today, a day of transition, but widespread rainfall spreading northwest to southeast across the state during the day. And then by tomorrow, big change, much cooler, drier conditions here for the upcoming weekend with temperatures falling back about 20 degrees. No rainfall probably after tomorrow morning until the middle of next week, Tuesday or Wednesday. And then as you just saw with our medium range, also, again, we should see moderation in temperatures back to above normal levels or warming by the middle of next week and probably beyond that, given the new long leads. I'll stop there and see if anybody has any questions.
Jeff, I do have one question for you.
Sure.
Dan is wondering if you could give an update on weather in the Minnesota, Dakota region. I'm guessing in terms of how their weather for planting would be.
There have been some similarities there, and I obviously here there have been showers on an almost daily basis here that complicate things, but I think there's been some progress this past week. So the weather there patterns have been very similar to ours, although they're in this drier. They already have changed and are in this cool dry pattern here. So there will be probably a lot done over the next several days in that part of the world, but similar conditions to what we've experienced in Michigan generally.
Do you think they'll have a frost risk? That
is a possibility, but I think it's unlikely. And even if there is, I don't know how much emergence they've had. Some of their crops are probably up by now, but for beans, I suspect that they're in a similar spot to where we are right now. But there is some patchy frost, but it does not look like a widespread freeze outbreak. And the other note, I think it is a transient, a progressive pattern. So we'll probably only see that threat maybe one or two nights. Probably Saturday and Sunday mornings would be the coldest mornings, and then we should already see even warming beginning by Monday. So it's a short-lived or short change anyway, temporary change. Any other questions? Let me move ahead here just with a reminder for our next week. Our speaker will be Dr. Kim Cassida from Department of Plant, Soils, and Microbial Sciences, and she's going to be speaking about alternative forages for next week. And with that, I will wrap up and turn it back over to Christian and or Phil.
Hey, Phil, this is Paul. Is Chris on, Ifanso? I'd like to have her comment a little bit. I have my traps out, and yesterday, for a week, I had over 1,000 armyworm moth in one of my hard stack traps. That was up considerably from the week before. So, I mean, I think those storms that Jeff brought last week probably brought those up. I had a couple other bucket traps with just 12, 14 in it, but I thought that was a fairly significant number. And I guess I'd like to ask Chris what that really means. What should we be looking for? Like our wheat up here our flag leaves are fully emerged.
Paul, it's Jeff. This question's been asked in several meetings this past week. And from the meteorological side of things, we have had some transport type of weather here over the last week with some southerly flow, but none of the classic events where you move insects hundreds of miles in one day. There hasn't been anything like that yet, but there has been general southerly flow. So okay. I guess it wouldn't be a surprise if there had been some transport, but it's just not one of those classic events that we see some seasons or some springs, early summers.
I imagine that brought the leafhoppers up too then.
Right. And it just, again, it's one of the issues here recently is there's been so much precip, and that the precip, just like dust particles, et cetera, it takes them out. The rain will make that transport a lot more complicated. And during most of those days that we did have strong southerly flow, we also had showers and thunderstorms, at least in places.
Jeff, after we have this weather this week, do you think that we'll have an extended period of dry weather long enough to get first cutting done? Because a lot of guys are asking me about that as far as quality and and weather?
That's a really good question. And right now, I would say the answer is yes. I think it definitely next week looks a whole lot more favorable than what we were facing a week ago. With again, think about the last week with an almost daily threat, and you could have actually gotten some work done, some forage harvest done this week, but it would have taken a pretty strong stomach given the afternoon. If some of these thunderstorms came up right to the edge of the property and stopped, or vice versa. So, but what we're looking at now, certainly beginning this weekend, is a significantly less of a threat for precip. I talked about the Tuesday, Wednesday timeframe, but I think the rainfall events will certainly be fewer and farther between beginning next week. So hopefully that will be better than what we've just been through.
So I also want to ask you, I was looking at other things when you're talking about the long look forecast. Are we quite a bit behind as far as growing degree days right now, or where are we?
Yeah, we are still behind, but considerably less than where we were a week ago. Most parts of the state, I looked at the numbers, over the last week we picked up 80 to 100 base 50 units in just 1 week. And that's that's clearly the largest jump it isn't surprising given the temperatures, but that we're still behind over the vast majority of the state, but not nearly as much. So most areas in terms of calendar time are between a few days behind. That's true in the southern part of the lower peninsula, to more than a week behind in the north. So the northern part of the state is still further behind, but we took a big chunk out of that deficit here this past week.
All right, thanks. Chris says her microphone's not working today. Purdue reports similar spotty high armyworm catches. Any fields that are weedy or weedy edges could be experiencing egg laying now in 10 to 14 days. There will be larvae infested wheat or corn. Are those numbers that Paul talked about significant enough, Chris? He had 1,000 in his trap. Is that right, Paul?
1,000 plus. I said uncle after 1,000.
You forgot you lost count, huh?
Well, I assume there was just estimating by look, it was probably 1,000 to 1,200. And I know those hard stacks are, the catch is usually pretty high. The numbers are big. And that's according to Chris, that generally means, Chris said that the hard stack are better for the armyworm. And, we really need to just start watching for them. I think we're going to have to do some scout and pay attention as we start thinking about putting fungicides onto our wheat, what that means.
Good morning, this is Dennis Pennington. We found some anthers in our preliminary yield trials at Mason. Flowering is close, and in terms of timing, last year we were probably 2 weeks behind, and this year we're probably a week to maybe 10 days behind in terms of normal development. Normally we're collecting flowering notes Memorial Day weekend, and we're going to be probably close to a week behind that. Last year we were 2 weeks. So Paul, I heard you say you got flagleaf fully emerged in your area. Yeah, we've got heads fully emerged in a lot of the varieties. Not all of them. There's still some in the boot. But yeah, so things are moving along, and yeah, you're right. Flowering fungicide application will be coming sooner rather than later.
And thank you everyone for attending today. Make sure and follow us on Twitter, Spotify, Facebook, or the Apple Podcasts. We also have all of the information that has been recorded today and will be available on our MSU Extension Field Crops webpage. As well as check us out on Twitter at MSUE Field Crops. Thanks everyone, and have a great day.